parabola is a quadratic function in the standard form f of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c, where a cannot equal 0. The vertex form is f of x equals a times x minus h squared plus k, and the vertex is at hk. The last form, which is intercept form, is f of x equals a times x minus p times x minus q. P and Q are the x-intercepts.
A is the coefficient of the x squared term in the parabola. As A increases, the parabola narrows. As A decreases, the parabola widens. If A is positive, there's a minimum and there's a U-shape up. If A is negative, there's a maximum and there's a U-shape down. And C is the y-intercept.
The domain in a parabola is all reals, from negative infinity to infinity. The range in an up U parabola is from the minimum inclusive to infinity. The range in a down U parabola is negative infinity to maximum inclusive.
This equation is written in standard form. In order to find the vertex, we must use the equation for the axis of symmetry, which states negative b over 2a. When you plug in negative 4 for negative b and negative 1 for a, you get that x is 2. Then you plug in 2 to wherever there's an x in the equation, and y is 1. So your vertex is 2, 1. Then you plug in 2 points to the left of the vertex and 2 points to the right of the vertex, and this is your graph. Your graph is a down U since a is negative. The domain is all reals, and the range is from negative infinity to 1 inclusive, and it's increasing from negative infinity to 2, and is decreasing from 2 to infinity. So our equation here is y equals 2x squared plus 8x plus 6. This is also in standard form. To find the vertex, we must use the equation for the axis of symmetry, which is negative b over 2a. So it's negative 8 over 2 times 2, which equals negative 2. Then, when you plug negative 2 back into the equation where x is, you get that the y value is negative 2. So our vertex is negative 2, negative 2. Then when you plug in certain numbers for x, you get certain numbers for y, and you plot those down. And a is positive, so it's up u. And then our domain is always all reals, and our range is negative 2 inclusive to infinity. Our parabola is increasing from negative 2 to infinity, and is decreasing from negative infinity to negative 2. This parabola is written in intercept form. In order to find the vertex, we must use the equation p plus q over 2. In this case, p is negative 5 and q is 1, since you always flip the signs of the numbers. When you plug in those numbers, x is negative 2. When you plug in negative 2 for wherever there's an x in the equation, y is 9. So your vertex is negative 2, 9. Then you plug in 2 points to the left of the vertex and 2 points to the right of the vertex, and this is your graph. Your graph is a down U because a is negative. The domain is always all reals, and the range is from infinity to 9 inclusive, and the graph is increasing from negative infinity to negative 2, and is decreasing from negative 2 to infinity. This parabola is written in intercept form. In order to find the vertex, we must use the equation p plus q over 2. In this case, p is negative 4 and q is 2, since you always flip the signs of the numbers. When you plug in negative 4 plus 2 over 2, x is negative 1. Then you plug in negative 1 to wherever there's an x in the equation, and y is negative 9. So your vertex is negative 1, negative 9. Then you plot 2 points to the left of the vertex and 2 points to the right, and this is your graph. The graph is an up U because a is positive. The domain is always all reals, and the range is from negative infinity to negative 5 inclusive, u, to 5 to infinity. The graph is increasing from 1 to infinity, and is decreasing from negative infinity to 1. This equation is written in vertex form. The vertex is negative h, k. Here, negative h is 3, and k is 1, so our vertex is 3, 1. Then you plot 2 points to the left of the vertex, and 2 points to the right of the vertex, and this is your graph. Your graph is a down U because a is negative. The domain is always all reals, and the range is from negative infinity to 1 inclusive. The graph is increasing from negative infinity to 3, and is decreasing from 3 to infinity. This graph is written in vertex form. The vertex is negative h, k. Here, h is negative 1, and k is negative 10. So our vertex is negative 1, negative 10. Then you plot 2 points to the left of the vertex and 2 points to the right of the vertex, and this is your graph. Your graph is an up U because a is positive. The domain is always all reals, and the range is from negative 10 inclusive to infinity, and the graph is increasing from negative 1 to infinity and is decreasing from negative infinity to negative 1.
This is the quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a.
The discriminant is b squared minus 4ac in the quadratic formula. The discriminant indicates whether there are 0, 1, or 2 x-intercepts in the parabola.
B squared minus 4ac is greater than 0. There will be 2 real solutions, and the graph will cross the x-axis twice. If b squared minus 4ac is less than 0, there will be no real solutions and it will not cross the x-axis. But if b squared minus 4ac equals 0, there will be 1 real solution and it will cross the axis.
This equation is negative 3x squared plus 6x plus 1. When I plugged it into the quadratic formula, I got negative 6 plus minus radical 6 squared minus 4 times negative 3 times 1 over 2 times negative 3. Simplified, it equals negative 6 plus minus radical 36 plus 12 over negative 6. When I add 36 plus 12, I get 48 under the radical. To simplify the radical even further, I got negative 6 plus minus 4 radical 3 over negative 6. And since I can divide the negative 6 by negative 6, the final answer equals 1 plus minus 2 radical 3 divided by 3. This equation is 2x squared plus 4x plus 2. When plugged into the quadratic formula, it equals negative 4 plus minus radical 4 squared minus 4 times 2 divided by 2 times 2. Simplified, it equals negative 4 plus minus radical 16 minus 16 divided by 4. Since 16 minus 16 equals 0, it is radical 0. But since radical 0 equals 0, you do not count it anymore. So simplified for the last step, it's negative 4 divided by 4, and that equals negative 1. This equation is 3x squared plus x plus 1. When it is plugged into the quadratic formula, it equals negative 1 plus minus radical 12 minus 4 times 3 times 1 over 2 times 3. Simplified, it equals negative 1 plus minus radical 1 minus 12 over 6. To simplify it one more time for the last step, it equals negative 1 plus minus radical negative 11 over 6. That is the final answer. To find the x-intercepts using the calculator, you have to use second calc 0. First, you plug in the equation into your calculator and press graph. After you press graph, you hit second calc 0. And once you press second calc 0, you have to hit left bound, and then hit right bound, and then hit enter. And once you hit enter, you will have your x-intercepts. The equation for completing the square is 2x squared plus 8x plus 5 equals 0. First, you subtract 5 from both sides. Then the equation is 2x squared plus 8x equals negative 5. To complete the square, you take out the greatest common factor, which is 2, from the equation, and then divide the middle term in half and square root it. Because this middle term is 4, when you divide it, it becomes 2, and then when you square root it, it goes back to 4. And then to continue completing the square, you multiply the solved number, which is 4, by the coefficient, which is 2, and you get 8, and bring it over to the other side. So now the equation is x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals negative 5 plus 8 divided by 2 after dividing the coefficient by both sides. The next step is putting it into perfect square form. So you have x plus 2 squared equals 3 halves. Then you need to square root both sides. So you get x plus 2 equals positive negative radical 3 halves. The next step is to subtract the 2 from the left side and bring it over to the right side. So x equals negative 2 plus minus radical 3 halves. But to rationalize the denominator, you need to multiply both the denominator and the numerator by radical 2. And the final answer is x equals negative 2 plus minus radical 6 over 2. To make the standard form equation into vertex form, I have to use completing the square. First, you subtract 9 from both sides, and the equation is now negative 9 equals 2x squared plus 8x. The next step is to factor out the greatest common factor. So you take out the 2, and it equals negative 9 equals 2 times x squared plus 4x. Then, to complete the square, you divide the middle term by 2, and then square it, and you get 4. To finish completing the square, you have to multiply the 4 by the coefficient of 2 and bring it over to the other side. So now the equation is negative 9 plus 8 equals 2 times x squared plus 4x plus 4. Negative 9 plus 8 equals negative 1, and x squared plus 4x plus 4 is the perfect square form of x plus 2 squared. So the equation is now negative 1 equals 2 times x plus 2 squared. To finish the equation, you have to add 1 to both sides, so y equals 2 times x plus 2 squared plus 1. This perfect square equation is x squared minus 16. To factor this, you take the numbers that multiply to equal both terms. The first parentheses is x minus 4, and the second parentheses is x plus 4. X times x equals x squared, and negative 4 times 4 equals negative 16. Then you set both parentheses equal to 0. So x minus 4 equals 0, and x plus 4 equals 0. Then to solve, you get x equals 4 and x equals negative 4. This equation is 3x squared minus 6x plus 9. To factor this equation, you first have to take out the greatest common factor. So you remove the 3. So the equation then becomes 3 times x squared minus 2x plus 3 equals 0. Then you divide the coefficient. So you divide by 3. And then, since when you divide by 0, it equals 0. So now the equation is x squared minus 2x plus 3 equals 0. And then to factor it, you take the numbers that multiply to equal both terms. So you get x minus 3 times x plus 1 equals 0, because if you FOIL it out, you understand that those two parentheses equals the equation. And then you set both parentheses equal to 0, and you get x minus 3 equals 0, and x plus 1 equals 0, and x equals 3, and x equals negative 1. This equation is a standard equation to graph. To do this, you have to find the numbers that multiply to equal the terms of the equation. These two numbers are 5 and 1. So the first parenthesis will be x plus 5, and the second parenthesis would be x plus 1, and the whole equation equals 0. And then you set both parentheses equal to 0, and you get x equals negative 5 and x equals negative 1. The equation is 3x squared plus 10x plus 7. I split up 10x to be 3x plus 7x so I could use group factoring to solve the equation. To do group factoring, I made 3x squared plus 3x a group and 7x plus 7 a group. And then, after I did that, I took the greatest common factor. So 3x squared plus 3x became 3x times x plus 1, and 7x plus 7 became 7 times x plus 1. And then after, I added 3x plus 7 and put that in parentheses, and then x plus 1 came down in the parentheses. Then I solved, and I got x equals negative 7/3, and x equals negative 1.
This is how you create an equation in vertex form when given the vertex and the y-intercept. You have to use the equation y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. In this case, when given the y-intercept, it actually means 0, 3. So now you have all the numbers necessary to plug into this equation. So 3 equals a times 0 minus 1 squared plus 2. Then, when you solve for a, you get 3 equals a plus 2, and then a equals 1. So now you know what a is. So then you plug a into the equation and you get y equals 1 times x minus 1 squared
plus 2. Here's how to find the complete vertex form for the quadratic equation when you're given a vertex and 2 points. In this case, the vertex is 1, 2, and the points given are 2, 5. So, what you do is you plug in these points into the equation y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. So, 5 is y, x is 2, h is 1, and k is 2. So you get 5 equals a times 2 minus 1 squared plus 2. Then when you solve, you get 5 equals a plus 2. Then 5 minus 2 is 3, so 3 is a. Then you plug the 3 into the equation and you get y equals 3 times x minus 1 squared plus 2.
To make this standard form equation into vertex form, I have to use completing the square. First, you subtract 9 from both sides, and the equation is now negative 9 equals 2x squared plus 8x. The next step is to factor out the greatest common factor. So you take out the 2, and it equals negative 9 equals 2 times x squared plus 4x. Then, to complete the square, you divide the middle term by 2, and then square it, and you get 4. To finish completing the square, you have to multiply the 4 by the coefficient of 2, and bring it over to the other side. So now the equation is negative 9 plus 8 equals 2 times x squared plus 4x plus 4. Negative 9 plus 8 equals negative 1, and x squared plus 4x plus 4 is the perfect square form of x plus 2 squared. So the equation is now negative 1 equals 2 times x plus 2 squared. To finish the equation, you have to add 1 to both sides, so y equals 2 times x plus 2 squared plus 1. To change the standard form equation into vertex form, we need to complete the square. First step is to subtract negative 4 from both sides. So now the equation equals negative 4 equals x squared plus 2x. Next, to complete the square, you need to divide the middle term by 2 and then square it, and the result is 1, and you also add that 1 onto the other side. So now after simplifying, it equals negative 3 equals x plus 1 squared. X plus 1 squared is the perfect square form of the factored equation before. The next step is to add 3 to both sides, and y equals x plus 1 squared plus 3. To change this vertex form quadratic equation into standard form, you need to square x minus 3. So after you square, you get y equals 2 times x squared minus 6x plus 9 plus 1. After, you need to distribute the 2, which is the coefficient. Once you distribute the 2, the equation equals y equals 2x squared minus 12x plus 18 plus 1. You have to add the 18 and 1 together to get the final equation. The final equation is y equals 2x squared minus 12x plus 19.